Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I welcome you to this meeting. I'm Councillor Neil Sanderson. I'm Vice Chair of the Planning Committee. Can I welcome you to this meeting on Wednesday the 18th of December, and I will be chairing this meeting. The meeting is being web streamed to the public through the Council's YouTube channel. During the meeting, when asked to speak, please use the push button in front of you, and this will allow the camera to pan in your general direction and everyone will be able to both see and hear you. Members of the public can observe but cannot participate in the meeting. Before we begin the formal agenda, I am obliged to read out the following notice. There will be no fire drill scheduled in the building this evening. If the fire alarm sounds, then please could I ask you to make your way out of the building, down to the main entrance and outside the main doors of the Town Hall, congregating by Caldecott Park gates. An officer of the Council will then give instructions on when it is safe to return to the building. First thing is a bit of housekeeping. I have to ask members if they're content with the contents of the minutes for our previous meeting on the 4th of December. Are members content with that? Do we have a mover? Okay. Moved by Councillor Harrington. Anyone seconding? Seconded by Councillor Freeman. Thank you. I will then sign the minutes. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies for absence from Councillors Maldis, Gillius, Srivastava and Karadia, and their substitutes respectively are Councillors Willis, Daly, Moran and Mistry.
And I welcome those to tonight's meeting. Declarations of interest. Do members have any non-pecuniary interests in this matter? Pecuniary interests. Have you all paid your council tax and community charge? You have, well done. In order, basically, there will be 3 speakers tonight, 1 for, 1 against, 2 against, 3 against, and a ward councillor. So, and there's also 1 speaker for the application. The planning officer will speak first and present the application. The committee will be asked if they have any points of clarification for the officer. And the planning officer will address those that are material interest to the application, i.e. they are matters that have arisen within the agenda. The officer will not deal with any extraneous matters or public interest matters that are not pertinent to the planning application. Any ward councillor or councillor who speaks on the application is required to leave before the decision is made. The committee will then go into debate of the application, and relevant questions can then be taken from any council law on the planning committee. The rules for public speaking are as follows. Each speaker will have exactly 3 minutes and no more than 3 minutes. Should you go over your slot, you can be disconnected from the public address system. And that is, again, to deal with matters pertinent to the application. In the interest of fairness, the supporter will be given nine minutes because they were basically responding to 3 planning officers, which is unusual. We normally only would have one planning officer per item on an agenda. Tonight, because this is such a major application, we actually have 3.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. We've got 9 minutes for the applicant on the application because there are 3 objectors registering to speak with 3 minutes each. So in the interest of fairness, equal time has been allocated to each side.
Thank you. Again, speakers should restrict their comments to the material planning matters, and there will be no introduction of late items. With that, I think we'll move over to the officers for their
Good evening. So the application site this evening is located approximately 6.7 kilometres to the northeast of Coventry city centre and approximately 100 metres to the southwest of the village of Anstey. It's situated entirely within the West Midlands Greenbelt and within the administrative area of Rugby Borough Council. It's been chosen as an optimal location within the Golden Triangle, which provides benefits in terms of access to the strategic road network and the ability to reach large parts of the mainland UK efficiently. The site covers an area of 112 hectares and is bounded to the north by the M6 motorway. The M69 runs adjacent to the site's western boundary for a distance of 480 metres, and 2 B-class roads frame the remainder of the site. The B4065 Hinckley Road to the northwest, which connects to the M6 Junction 2 to Anstey and Wolvie, and B4029 to the northeast and southeast. The northern boundary is defined by agricultural fields and a section of the Oxford Canal. The site will be arranged with a campus heart at its centre. This will include the office headquarters, concept, leisure and retail research and development, a childcare day nursery, hotel, learning and development, a mobility hub, and food and beverage uses. To the northwest of this, the group accommodation is proposed to support the learning and development. And to the south of the site, from west to east, 5 logistics buildings with associated offices and parking are proposed. A number of ancillary structures will support utilities and security for the site. Fraser Group's existing headquarters facility is in Shirebrook in Derbyshire, shown on this slide. The business philosophy is to manage operations from a central hub, and this headquarters has now run out of space and is no longer able to support the business growth. Fraser's Group started as a small store in Maidenhead in 1982 and from there has grown to become a global retail group. The business is comprised of a collection of brands that includes Sports Direct, House of Fraser, Flannels, Game, Jack Willis, Evans Cycles, to name but a few. These slides show site photographs. Here we have a view of Asheville, from Asheville Hinckley Road, where Unit 5 warehouse will be located. And then we have a view of Home Farm and Pylon 1. In the centre is Cronafields Farm, and at the bottom right, the southwest corner of the site looking north. Moving on, we have the Hinckley Road embankment, the woodland in the southwest area, which is to be retained, fields to the south, which is in the central part, intervisibility with Anstey Business Park, bottom right. And then the final slide for site photographs, we have view towards Anstey, the eastern fields, the footbridge that connects over the M6 motorway, central northern field towards Anstey, the pylons that are at the centre of the site, which are to be removed, And the northwest field, group accommodation proposed. That's where the group accommodation will be going. I'll now hand over to my colleague Ella to continue the presentation.
So this slide shows the site layout. So as Ruth mentioned, we have the 5 warehouse units to the south of the site, with the campus heart comprising of the retail, office, HQ, learning and development facilities, sports facilities, and the hotel. To the northwest of the site, the group accommodation sits. We'll go through each of these in detail now. This is a visual of what the site is proposed to look like. And these are all the floor spaces associated with each individual use. We've set out here some comparisons, and that pie chart shows the comparisons. So the Fraser's campus is the dark blue in that pie chart, and it's compared there to Anstey Business Park and Prosper Anstey, which is to the south of the site, the other side of the M6. Prologis Park in Brighton, which is another employment site in Rugby, and the entirety of Magna Park in purple. This shows a bird's eye view of the logistics unit. This is Unit 1. 5 units are proposed, so a total floor space of 277,780 square metres. The largest, which is Unit 1 shown here, is just under 115,000 square metres, and it has a length of 457 metres and a width of 222 metres. The smallest is just over 25,000 square metres, and it has a length of 193 metres and a width of 122 metres. For comparison, Sainsbury's at Durft is 92,000 square metres, and LEVC at Anstey Park is 25,000 square metres. These are visuals of what the elevations of the logistics units will look like. And the proposed height of the highest unit is 27 metres, and of the smallest unit is 20 metres. For comparison, Sainsbury's at Durf is 27 metres, so the same height as the highest unit, and MTC at Anstey is 19 metres. This shows the campus heart arrangement. So it shows the office HQ, the nursery within the retail street, food and beverage, leisure, concept retail, an auditorium which will seat 750 seats, a hotel, and the car parking associated with both the campus heart and Unit 1. The office HQ is proposed to the east of the campus heart, and will provide the HQ office for Fraser Group. It is proposed to be 18,860 square metres with a height of 24 metres. This is a visualisation of what the HQ will entail, and it will also include the supplier hub.
On the screen now is the floor plan of the retail floor space. So in total, it's 21,600 square metres of retail floor space that's proposed, with 592 square metres of food and beverage space, and then some convenience retail totalling just over 380 square metres. If I can... So the retail floor space proposed is shown on screen here. So it's totaling just over 21,600 square metres. And the closest comparison that we found locally for reference is Elliott's Field Phase 1 retail. That's coming in at just over 23,000 square metres. And you can see here there's a pie chart that represents the proposed development in the green there. That's the amount of floor space, retail floor space proposed by Fraser's Group. And you can see there it's very much comparable to Elliott's Field. There are some other examples on the screen there, giving you comparisons to other developments in and around the area. We also have convenience retail proposed on site. So on Fraser's development, it would be 380 square metres, and the closest comparison that we found locally is that of Sainsbury's local in Hillmorton Road, that's coming in at just over 400 square metres. So you can see there, it's basically this wedge on the pie chart, and it's very much comparable to the Sainsbury's local there. In terms of what that would look like on the ground, you can see here the beginning of the retail street in the campus heart of the development. And then that's looking through the retail street towards the office HQ at the rear of the image on screen. And then you can see here, this is a view of the food and beverage facility located down just in front of the offices and right within the heart of the development. Also proposed is a hotel, a learning facility and a leisure facility. So the leisure facility will total just over 5,000 square metres, and by comparison that would be roughly the size of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Centre in Rugby. That's coming in, that's just around 5,000 square metres, so very comparable there. Also, you have a Learning and Development Academy, which is located on the screen here, right in the centre of the floor plan. That would total just over 3,200 square metres. And then also proposed is a 100-bed hotel. That's located here. What that would look like on the ground is represented on the screen before you. So this building here is the hotel. Then you have the Learning and Training Academy in here, and then the Leisure Centre just to the side there. I have one more image as well, looking at it from a different angle as you would come into the site. You can see here, this is the hotel. And then there's the retail that's just in the foreground there. And then there's also group accommodation proposed on the site. So there's 80 units in total. You can see those there. They would take the form of these pods that would be combined in groups of 8 with shared kitchen and communal facilities. You can see there's the pods there. Each of those is a unit. And this is what it would look like on the ground. It would be heavily landscape planted and set within that landscape setting. And again, a street view of that development. So in terms of design, we feel that it does respond positively to the wider context, the constraints and opportunities that the development site proposes. We believe that careful consideration has been given to the building placement, the height and the architectural style of those buildings. It would basically, the design of development has been put forward in such a way that it reduces and mitigates potential negative impacts where possible. The buildings and landscaping create a cohesive group, and we believe that it achieves high quality design that creates a distinct character and sense of place.
So in relation to an application update, late item addendums have been published. These were mainly to cover the new MPPF that was published on the 12th of December. This concluded that there was no material impact to the assessment that was undertaken within the committee report. The other items that were dealt with in the late item addendums will be covered off within the relevant sections of this presentation. Since the latest late item addendum was published at lunchtime today, there have been 3 updates. So Warwickshire have confirmed that the contribution towards the M6 Junction 3 is to be £1,866,264, and this will be within the Section 106. Shilton and Barnacle Parish Council have objected again in relation to the Greenbelt, light pollution, visual impact, traffic impact, and other alternative sites being available, and they request that the application is deferred. It's also noted that within paragraph 6.3 of the committee report, it states that National Highways, Warwickshire County Council Highways and the Environment Agency object. They no longer object to these proposals. In terms of the key issues, these are the key issues that are that we will go through within this presentation. There are other key issues that the report does comment on, and these will be summarised at the end. So in terms of the principle of development, the type of development that is proposed is considered to be in a sustainable relationship in that it offers a genuine choice for transport modes. The proposal is considered to be in conflict with the development plan read as a whole, and that is set out within the committee report. There is also some conflict with policy GP2, which identifies Rugby as the main focus for all development in the borough. However, policy GP2 does allow development where in accordance with National Greenbelt policy, which includes where very special circumstances are demonstrated. This will therefore be weighed within the planning balance.
Turning now to the matter of the impact on the Greenbelt, there would be harms arising from this proposed development. So, to show you here, this is our borough map, and the green represents the Greenbelt. The site is this area shown edged in orange, and we believe that the proposal would be inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. It would result in the permanent loss of openness on the site. It would result in unrestricted sprawl of a large urban area into open agricultural countryside. It would result in encroachment of built development into the countryside. It would contribute to a reduction in the gap between neighbouring towns, and it would not assist in urban regeneration. These are all harms which attract substantial weight in the planning balance, and the development should therefore not be approved except in very special circumstances.
In relation to the proposals put forward, it is proposed that this campus is to be an integrated campus. This means that all of the uses would be integrated and therefore need to all be located on the same site. This is a matter of planning judgment. The operator statement sets out the detail as to why the proposed uses in the development need to be integrated. This has been assessed within the committee report, and based on the evidence presented alongside a site visit to Shirebrook, which is the existing site, which showed the physical and non-physical departmental links, is considered that all elements within the campus are, alongside the warehouses, deliver an integrated campus. An alternative site assessment has been undertaken. This image here shows the optimum location for this development, which was determined using a model which was undertaken to produce where the optimum location would be. That location, which is the star in the middle, is around Hinckley. This plus the golden triangle determined the search area for the alternative sites which have been looked at. A 50-hectare site area was determined as the minimum for any alternative site due to this theoretically being the size that could accommodate the development. A 4-stage assessment has been undertaken and over 100 alternative sites has been considered. 17 sites got to the final stage. Overall, when considering the range of locational requirements, it is not considered that any other alternative site has an overall higher performance for the specific form of development proposed. In relation to the principle of employment development, there's various levels to this assessment. Starting with the local plan, it is contrary to policy ED3, and the requirement within the local plan in terms of employment needs is on track to be delivered. Other evidence bases which have been published in the last few years are the Housing and Economic Development Needs Assessment, which was published in 2022, and the West Midlands Strategic Employment Site Study, which was published this year. They give a residual indicative need of 146 hectares in Rugby up to 2041. this will be for the new local plan to consider. Harms are identified that in relation to the conflict with local plan policy ED3 and the spatial strategy in policy GP4 in relation to employment development. In terms of the need for development, Frasers have put a case forward in relation to the central location for logistics, expansion and growth due to the limited space that Shirebrook now has, and purpose-built accommodation for the level of automation that is coming forward in the future. In relation to labour pool, their current site does not have the requirement within the local facility that is needed for their operation. Therefore, the proposed site could also deliver local labour from a bigger pool and skilled workers. In relation to the need for development, the urgency is mainly the capacity constraints at Shirebrook, and any new campus would need to be operational in 2029-2030, given the business needs and in order to realise the economic benefits proposed. In relation to the local plan, the date for adoption is envisaged to be June 2027. Therefore, it is assessed that a case has been made as to why this proposal needs to come forward ahead of the local plan.
Turning now to the main town centre uses, you can see on screen here what the main town centre uses are as defined in the National Planning Policy Framework. They are the hotel, the leisure facility, the retail, the food and beverage, and the offices. The policy requirement is for a sequential test to be carried out to demonstrate whether this is the most sequentially preferable location for the main town centre uses. In this respect, the proposal is for an integrated campus, and officers consider that it therefore cannot be disaggregated. That means that the retail, the hotel, the offices and such like can't individually be put on smaller sites elsewhere within the area. It's all coming forward as one development. On that basis, an assessment has been carried out looking at alternatives, and no sequentially preferable sites have been found. The sequential test is therefore deemed to have been satisfied. In terms of the retail impact, you can see here the different impacts on centres within the local area. A retail impact assessment sets out that the impact of Rugby Town Centre would be up to 1%, minus 1% impact on turnover. For Coventry City Centre, it would be up to a minus 4% impact. And the Neaton Town Centre would be a minus 3.9% impact. Those impact percentages would be higher if Fraser Group stores within the existing centres, such as Rugby, Coventry and the Neaton, were to be closed. Coventry City Council have therefore objected to the impact of this development on Coventry City Centre. They have advised that there would be a significant adverse impact on their centre. The council has therefore appointed an independent retail consultant to look at the retail impact assessment. That found that there would be a significant adverse impact on Coventry City Centre. The impact at other centres, including Rugby, would not be significant adverse. On balance, conditions and legal agreements have been proposed to try and reduce that impact. And that includes an obligation to prevent Fraser's stores in Coventry and the Neaton from closing within 5 years of the retail opening. However, officers consider that the proposal does not comply with policy TC2 of the local plan on the basis of the impact to Coventry City Centre.
So turning to landscape and visual impact, there is a significant change in the landscape character. This shows one viewpoint from the east of the site, and it shows the baseline photography, so at the top what the site currently looks like and what the proposed development would look like 15 years after development. There's 5 of these viewpoints that we'll run through. But in terms of the change, there is a significant change. The development will break the skyline and reduce long-distance views across the landscape. The scale and the mass of the logistics units are large and will change the experience of the view from one that is predominantly rural to a view which is much more urban in character. This next view is from the M6 footbridge, and again shows the baseline and what the development is proposed to look like at year 15. This is from the west of the site, so looking to Unit 5, and again shows the difference in the development. The green shown on the bottom image is the proposed planting. This is from the north of the site, so close to just north of the local wildlife site, and it shows the long distance view from just to the edge of Anstey. This is from within the local wildlife site, and again shows the change. And the final viewpoint is from the footpath to the north of the site, which looks towards Crownfields Farm, and again shows the change. It is considered that there will be a significant residual adverse impact on both the landscape and visual effects, and this is given significant weight within the planning balance. This slide shows the proposed landscape strategy. There will be a loss of 78 individual trees, some of which are category A and B. 95 trees are retained across the site, and approximately 598 extra heavy standard trees, of which 75 will be oak trees, will be planted, and 899 standard trees will also be planted. In addition, there will be approximately 88,000 feathered and transparent trees to be planted as well. There will be some loss of hedgerows, which will be compensated by new hedgerow planting. There will be a loss of approximately 4 hectares of existing woodland, but approximately 11 hectares of woodland will be planted. Additional green infrastructure corridors have been introduced north to south within the site, and there will be continuous planted borders around the site of approximately 20 to 30 metres. It is considered that the loss of green infrastructure, trees and hedgerows therefore conflict with policy. However, given the proposed landscape strategy and significant level of mitigation proposed across the site, it is deemed acceptable in this instance. In relation to ecology, this image shows the local wildlife site in yellow, which is within the site. The site is within the Principal Biodiversity Opportunity Expansion Area and within the strategic blue and green corridors also passing through the site. The extensive green infrastructure of the site enables the scope to mitigate and/or compensate any necessary habitat losses through restoration of retained habitats. Mitigation for bats and badgers on the site is considered to be acceptable. However, conditions will be imposed. Creation of a linear bank along the northern edge of one of the local wildlife site fields will be created in order to introduce a protected species, which is the common lizard, which is a protected reptile. In relation to biodiversity net gain, there is a 16% habitat unit gain, 12% hedgerow unit gain, and 16% watercourse unit gain. Moving on to highways, this image shows the proposed site access in green. That is the primary site access, which then creates a network throughout the site in order to access the campus heart and the various warehousing developments. There is a secondary site access, which is the pink arrow. This is limited, and there will be no HGV access to this. This is controlled by conditions, and there will also be various implementation methods in terms of tracking of vehicles and counters and cameras. Just to the north of the top of this slide shows the bus and taxi interchange, which will be an area within the campus heart, shown by the curly arrow, where public transport can access the centre of the site, to allow drop-offs and to promote sustainable transport. In relation to car parking and cycle parking, there is just over 7,000 car parking spaces that should be provided through policy. Just under 3,000 are proposed. In relation to cycle parking through policy, just over 3,000 cycle parking spaces should be provided, and a proposal of 502 spaces and 24 e-bike spaces and an additional 36 cycle parking spaces are provided. The provision is below standards, however, based on the transport assessment and the mitigation of the travel plan and the modal shift which is proposed for this site is considered to be acceptable. The quantum of car and cycle parking proposed will accommodate the anticipated demand, mainly due to the shift patterns for the warehousing and other modal shift changes that they are intending to implement. In relation to the wider area, this will be monitored through the travel plan for a 10-year period from occupation, which will be provided within the Section 106. In addition, there is conditions that control parking within Anstey and surveys to be undertaken over a certain time period to monitor this. A mobility hub is proposed to the end of the retail street and will include lockers, shower facilities, bicycle maintenance, and e-bicycles and e-scooters for staff use. In relation to the modelling that has been undertaken for the assessment, there's been 3 networks that have been looked at. On the left-hand side of this shows Coventry's network and the 19 junctions which has been assessed. To the north, in that grey image, is the RAM model, which is Warwickshire County Council's model, and that shows the strategic area that has been assessed in dark grey, and this obviously covers some of Coventry's network and also the strategic road network. To the south is the image which shows the strategic road network, and it shows all of the junctions which has been assessed, which includes M6 Junction 2 and Junction 3, the M6 Junction 1 and the A46. In relation to this, Warwickshire County Council have no objection, National Highways have no objection, but Coventry City Council object to the scheme. Their detailed objections are set out within the committee report. Based on the modelling assessment undertaken, these are the junctions that mitigation is proposed. For M6 Junction 3, it will be a contribution, as mentioned at the start of this presentation. For the others, it is mitigation on the ground that will be implemented and will all be controlled by condition. For sustainable transport, there is 3 elements to this. In relation to bus service provision, the public bus routes will be improved, and there will be approximately £4 million to both Warwickshire and Transport for West Midlands for their individual bus services that will improve the current public service routes. In relation to shuttle bus provision, this diagram on the slide shows the illustrative routes for shuttle buses. These will be direct for any of the workers, and they will be for the campus only. It is considered that these are illustrative at the moment due to the construction period being approximately 6 years, so therefore they will be ironed out at a later stage. This will be included within the Section 106. In addition to the shuttle bus, there will also be demand responsive travel, which is intended to be minibuses to complement the service of the shuttle buses shown within this illustration. For public rights of way, the top image shows the existing public rights of way, and the proposed is the diversion to the north-south route, which is R31A, and the east-west route, which is R31. They will still be provided within the site and they will be enhanced, but there will be a slight diversion around the development. In addition, cycle and pedestrian routes are provided outside of the development, There will be a link to the Binley Cycleway in Coventry, a link improvement on the canal towpath from the site to Grove Road in Anstey. Central Boulevard in Anstey Park will be enhanced as there will be a link directly over the M6 footbridge to this in terms of a cycleway, which will eventually link into Binley Cycleway. In addition, M6 Junction 2 pedestrian facilities will be improved.
Turning to flood risk and drainage, the application site flood risk is shown here. First of all, you have the fluvial flood risk. You can see there the application site outlined in red, and there's this element of the application site that falls within the flood zone. You also have risk of surface water flood risk. You can see here again, there's various drainage ditches that run across the site currently, and in times of flood, there is a risk of that overspilling the banks onto the adjacent land. There is a further risk of flooding from groundwater, and that's shown here. Obviously, the darker colour shows the area of greater risk from groundwater flooding. The first step is for the applicant to follow a sequential test, looking at whether this is the most sequentially preferable site for development, taking into account flood risk. In that respect, the assessment which has been carried out has looked at flood risk from all sources for 44 alternative sites. That's within the alternative sites assessment as shown here. Of those, 26 sites were found to be sequentially preferable for flood risk, and the sequential test has therefore not been passed. In terms of the development itself and how that would sit within the flood risk issues that we've just identified, there are various different mitigation measures proposed. That includes attenuation ponds, attenuation tanks, and swales. So you can see here some of the different features that are proposed around the building. So you have tanks within the ground here, you have attenuation ponds in the lighter blue, and then you have swales that run alongside the highway network throughout the development. There's also bunds that are proposed to deal with any potential issues during extreme climate events where flood risk is potentially greater to occur. That's shown in this hatched red area here and down here. And that will show with the bunds that would be contained. The post-development flood risk has therefore been considered by both Warwickshire County Council Flood Risk Management and the Environment Agency, both of whom raised no objection to the proposed development. They are satisfied that flood risk would not be increased elsewhere. They are also satisfied that the development itself is flood resilient and resistant. The proposal therefore complies with policy SDC 5 and SDC 6 of the local plan. In terms of heritage, the applicant has looked at a range of different heritage assets within a 5-kilometre radius of the application site, as denoted by this red circle here. The shading of green and yellow and orange indicates areas where there's theoretical zones of visibility from different areas towards the proposed development. And out of all of the heritage assets that have been identified, there are 4 in particular where a low level of less than substantial harm is deemed to occur. And this has been verified by the Council's independent heritage advisors. So first of all, we have Anstey Hall, which is a Grade 2 star listed building located here. And that's probably the most impacted. You'll be able to see intervisibility between the application site and that heritage asset. There's also a deserted village of Hopsford, scheduled monument located here. The setting of that would be impacted. And further, the impact on Brinklow Castle, a scheduled monument, and the Church of St John the Baptist, a Grade 2 star listed building located here, would be impacted. The development site sits down in the distance here. That's the indivisibility there. In terms of noise, various assessments have been undertaken to establish what impact would occur on the surrounding area. Operational noise is obviously a key consideration, and in that respect, the buildings have been considered in terms of their design, the construction of those, to ensure that there would not be sound from the operations within the building leaking out and impacting on the surrounding area. So the very detailed specifications have also been provided for all plant and equipment located within the development and associated with those buildings. Conditions are proposed to further ensure that that is dealt with appropriately. The issue of on-site vehicles has also been considered, and that's the two images that you see here. This is the daytime modelling, and this is the nighttime modelling. The orange shows obviously higher levels of noise, and that obviously reduces the further away from the development, and at night time the levels are less. So the proposal to reduce noise from vehicular movements on site is through the use of earth bunds that are proposed around the perimeter of the site to basically act as a acoustic screen and block for noise arising from vehicles. It's also proposed to use conditions to limit and control reversing alarms. There is an auditorium within the site which has the potential to have amplified music and events within it. And to that end, the building envelope design has been put forward in a way that would mitigate that harm. It would contain the sound within the building. There is also a proposal for a noise and hours condition and management plan to also ensure that there would be no impacts arising from that. Also, as part of the proposals, you'll have noted that a helipad is proposed, allowing the use of the site for helicopter landing. Now, that's been modelled in detail with a worst-case scenario with up to 8 movements a day between the hours of 7 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock in the evening. The actual anticipated movements is substantially less than what's been modelled. It's 20 movements a month that's anticipated. So the worst-case scenario does give a very useful benchmark to establish what the potential noise impacts could be. So you can see here there's a flight path that's proposed. It's a 3.5 kilometre arrival and departure flight path, and there are residential dwellings underneath that. Naturally, if a helicopter was coming to or from the site, that would be audible during each movement. But overall, there would be a negligible impact on ambient levels. Conditions are proposed, as set out on the agenda, to limit the impact from the helicopter movements. Turning to lighting, you can see here the current site. So you can see the red line here. That's actually a dark natural zone at the moment in terms of brightness, and that would change with the development to a suburban medium district level of brightness. The council has therefore appointed an independent lighting consultant to review the impact of that development. They have found that there would be no significant lighting level increase at nearby residential properties. The impact of glare would be minimal. There would be no significant upward light creating sky glow. But there are improvements that would be possible beyond that which has been proposed. And to that end, conditions are on the agenda setting out a requirement to submit further lighting design, control and operation. Turning now to climate change and carbon emissions, the proposal is targeting net zero carbon for embodied carbon. So that's the embodied carbon is the materials that are used in the development, looking at it from beginning to end over the lifetime of the development. So basically what they've done is looked at a variety of materials and selected those which reduce the impacts. So it's looking at things like structures with reduced spans, timber structures, emitting some finishes, and using low carbon asphalt and carbon steel. In terms of the operational energy and carbon emissions. The proposal follows the energy hierarchy as set out on the screen here. And in following that, the buildings achieve net zero carbon when operational. The first step is reducing energy demand, and that's looking at things like the building size, the form, and the placement. It's a fabric-first approach, and it's looking at passive and active design. So that's all been incorporated within the layout plans that you've been shown on the screen earlier. The second step is looking at supplying energy through efficient means. So what they've done here is employed an all-electric strategy. They've looked at air and water source heat pumps, local energy centres, efficient systems, lighting and controls, building management system monitoring, and energy efficiency well above minimum regulations is achieved as a result. The final step is utilising renewable energy, and to that end you can see here that there's 2 units that have solar panels across the entirety of the roofs. That would generate 40% of the electricity needs of that development. The remaining electricity would come from off-site renewable energy sources, and that would be controlled through a condition requiring that. All other roofs across the units, so that's these other 3 units, have been designed to allow for future PV expansion as well. The outcome is that overall it achieves a BREEAM outstanding rating, it achieves net zero carbon, and it would be an exemplary development in terms of carbon emissions that leads to a benefit of significant weight in favour.
Moving on to some benefits from the scheme. So we first looked at economic. Around the development proposed, there's approximately 15 areas of deprivation locally, which are in the top 10% most deprived in the country. In terms of national benefits of this proposal, approximately £50 million of additional contributions towards gross domestic product each year will be provided, and it will be a boost to UK economy by approximately £69 million per year. In relation to local economic benefits, there would be approximately 885 to 800 construction jobs provided, approximately 5,800 operational jobs provided. Employment and skills plans will be obligated through the Section 106 for both the construction periods and the operational period up to a 10-year period. An employment and skills hub within Rugby is also to be provided through the Section 106. Employee spending of approximately £24.4 million per year is anticipated. And finally, approximately 235 to 333 million in gross value added GVA per year. Turning to social and community benefits, there will be a community use agreement obligated through the Section 106, which will allow the local community to use both the leisure and the auditorium and classrooms facilities. There will be local prioritisation through the procurement strategy, which will be obligated through the Section 106. There is a public transport betterment, as referenced earlier within the highways section. There will be approximately 48 hectares of new accessible open space provided, and this will be obligated within the Section 106 to be maintained for the public access in perpetuity. The 12-hectare local wildlife site will also be enhanced, and the public rights of way across the site and connecting to the site will also be enhanced. Other issues are listed here that were identified within the committee report. All of these issues are considered to be acceptable, some subject to conditions or obligations in relation to these areas. In relation to planning obligations, the detailed heads of terms is set out within the committee report and updated within the late items. There's an obligation for the retail floor space retention in Coventry and Nuneaton, improvements to the canal towpath from Anstey to Grove Road, from the site to Grove Road in Anstey, sustainable transport contributions to bus services in both Warwickshire and to Transport for West Midlands, which is Coventry's area, provision of shuttle buses and demand responsive transport, which were mentioned earlier in this presentation, employment and skills obligations in relation to the Employment and Skills Hub and the Employment and Skills Plans, which has just been referenced, open space provision to be retained in perpetuity. In relation to highways, the travel plan will be obligated to be monitored for a 10-year period to ensure that all of the measures within that are realised. M6 Junction 3, there will be an obligation of approximately £1.8 million, and there will also be a peak period trip impact cap, which means that within the AM and PM peaks, if the development goes over the anticipated trip rates that have been provided for the application, there will be a £5,000 per day penalty to the applicant. There will be a community use agreement, and in addition, monitoring contributions for both Warwickshire and Rugby. It is considered that all of the above obligations meet the seal compliance test as set out within 8C within this slide. Moving to the planning balance. This summarises everything that has been presented and is within the committee report and late items. So in relation to harm, there is substantial weight given to the harm to Greenbelt. There is also substantial weight given to the significant adverse impact on retail in Coventry City. There is moderate weight assigned to the loss of 70 hectares of agricultural land and 13 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land. There is substantial weight given to the impact on landscape and visual impacts. In relation to the loss of 9 Category A and 18 Category B trees, moderate weight is given due to the mitigation proposed. In relation to the green infrastructure loss, limited weight is given that the mitigation proposed as well. Less than substantial harm has been identified to 4 heritage assets, and this is given significant weight in the planning balance. The failure of the sequential test in relation to flood risk is also given significant weight, and the impact upon one junction within Coventry City network, which is deemed to have a severe impact, is also given substantial weight. In relation to the benefits, the national economic benefits as a whole is given substantial weight. The significant job creation on site is given significant weight. The employee spending within the local economy is given moderate weight. The gross value added per year, which is approximately 10% growth in Rugby's economy, is given substantial weight. The procurement and skills training and the skills hub within Rugby is given significant weight. The community use agreement in relation to leisure and learning and development facilities is given moderate weight. The 3v5 3G pitches is given limited weight. The 48 hectares of new accessible public open space and enhancements to the local wildlife sites and introduction of the common lizard is given significant weight. The 16% habitat gain, 12% hedgerow gain and 16% watercourse net gain is given significant weight. The public transport improvements within the local area is given moderate weight. The zero carbon buildings and sustainability of the site is given significant weight. And finally, the improvements to the existing footpaths throughout the site is given moderate weight.
Can I ask members of the public to desist from talking whilst the presentation is in progress? You're just stopping other people hearing what the officers have to say. Thank you.
Overall, it is considered that the totality of the economic, environmental and social benefits clearly outweigh the combined weight of the harm to the Greenbelt and all of the harms identified within the slide. Very special circumstances are necessary to justify the development. Therefore, it is concluded that very special circumstances do exist and the application should be approved, subject to this recommendation on screen and set out within the committee report and late items.
Are there any questions from the members regarding clarification to the officer? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you for your report. It's evident a lot of work's gone into it. There are a number of points of clarification. I'm not sure I'm going to get through all of them. Can I just start with the first one? We received a report, one an appendum of another 60 pages, and we've received again another appendum at lunchtime today. There seems to be a rush in order to get this to planning committee, this being the last Wednesday of the year. Could I be advised why we can't wait to January or sometime next year when we would have had more time to duly consider the material in front of us?
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. As members will be aware and members of the public will be aware, this application has been with the council for over a year. It's also been publicly consulted on prior to the application coming in. So this has been in the public domain for over an 18-month period. There was late items published yesterday. One of the reasons for that was that last week the government published a new national planning policy framework, which means that is common practice. We need to update the relevant paragraphs that are in the officer report to reflect the new paragraphs within the NPPF. That also meant that a revised decision notice needed to be produced. So of the 60 pages, 15 pages were updates to the paragraph numbers and updates from several statutory consultees that had responded since the agenda was published. The other 45 pages were the draft decision notice. It is common on large applications like this where you will get constant information that's submitted, and we have provided that to members in a timely manner as it has come in, and it complies with the procedures. Officers are also here this evening, as you've asked for clarification on this. The information necessary for members to be able to consider this application are before you this evening. And if you have any questions of clarification, then officers are here to answer those.
Could I just ask for I had a specific thing there, why this couldn't happen in January, why it's occurring on the 18th of December. Can you reveal any reason why this couldn't happen in January?
The application has been presented to members as it is ready for determination.
Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. More of an observation, really, before we go to speakers. I look around me.
Could you keep it to points of clarification? General debate will be later.
I will, but the point I was going to be making before we go into debate later is looking around me at the makeup of the committee.
Chair, can I just remind you, gently, this is points of clarification to the officer.
I will save that for the moment. Your chair, not me.
Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to officers for clearly a very, very comprehensive report. Couple of points of clarification for me on some of the green issues. You presented an image of Rugby's green belt. If you could clarify what percentage we're talking about here. Second, all of the landscaping strategy in tree and hedgerow planting. Can you just clarify, please, when that strategy begins? And the third point of clarification, please, just expand. You talked about overall net biodiversity gain. Is that in real terms on day one, or how is that being monitored and measured? Please, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll take the Greenbelt issue. So it's set out in paragraph 10.3 of the officer report, Basically, the greenbelt land in the borough is 58.2% of the total area of land within our borough. This application site forms 0.55% of Rugby's greenbelt.
Okay, and then in relation to the other points, the strategy begins, so the landscaping plans are conditioned to be implemented and they are within phases, so the construction of the whole development will not be undertaken in one, it will be done in different phases. So it's conditioned that a phasing plan to be submitted and then the implementation of each landscaping within each phase has to be undertaken within that timescale for that phase. And biodiversity net gain. So in relation to that, there is a landscape and environmental management plan condition, and that will require before commencement that a revised metric be submitted in accordance with the details that are going to be approved at a later date in terms of if the landscaping for the local wildlife site. So a revised metric has to be submitted to determine that there is no less than what has been proposed, so the 16% for both habitat and watercourses and 12% as well. So it will be a minimum of that net gain, it could be higher, and that will be implemented in accordance with the landscaping strategy, so within each phase of the construction.
One further point of clarification. When this sequential test was performed and looked at alternative sites, the word high performance, well, two words, high performance was used. Could you please define what qualifies as high performance, what parameters have been used in that assessment?
Can I just clarify that it's the alternative site assessment that you're referencing?
Correct.
Okay, so in relation to the alternative site assessment, various stages were undertaken. When it got to the final stage in terms of determining that this site is preferable to any other sites, high performance references the criteria that are undertaken. So for example, in relation to the distance from the strategic road network, which is the M6, M69, in this instance, there could be another site that is very similar to this site, but is further away from the strategic road network, for example. So therefore, this site would have a higher performance in relation to that than the other site that has been assessed.
Could you please tell me what the others are? That is only one parameter. I really would like to understand all the parameters, because I certainly can, if that was the high performance, there are sites closer.
So there's a methodology section within reference paragraph 12.10 of the report, and that goes through what each four of the stages are, how sites were identified, the minimum site threshold, and then what each stage assessed. So, for example, it goes through kind of the first stage is the size, the correct size, and then it gets to...
Apologies, you're not answering my question. I will accept you may not be able to answer. I think in the report it talks about labour accessibility and things like that. You haven't mentioned those parameters. That's what I was trying to look for.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Thank you for the detailed presentation. I just had a question about the economic benefits. I think with the harms and benefits balance that we're all going to have to consider at the end of this meeting, I really want to dig a little deeper with the economic benefits. Obviously, the economic benefits to the borough are, in some ways, quite impressive, but I'm just concerned, do they consider the negative impact of this site opening on Shirebrook and, say, nearby towns such as Mansfield and Chesterfield in these numbers? So I know it talks about new jobs for Rugby, it talks about increasing our economy, but has the negative impact on the imagined closure of the site in Shirebrook being taken into account with those numbers?
So impacts on the surrounding area, so for example, the retail impact on Coventry, that has been assessed. In terms of the economic impact upon other areas, that is not a material planning consideration for this, as it's not within the proposal.
Yeah, thank you. My question is on traffic and management of the vehicles entering and leaving the site. I can see from the plan that there is a large entrance off the motorway, which is some 150 metres before the entrance to the village of Anstey. And I think I noticed on one of the slides it said no HGVs beyond this point or something similar. And there's another entrance on the road towards Brinklow, which said it'd be light vehicles only. The main road in and through Anstey doesn't have any restrictions on HGVs. So I'm curious as to how the HGVs arriving from the motorway network or from elsewhere will be controlled. Because is there some scheme in place, some enforcement scheme, and how would that work?
Yes, so there are various conditions imposed on the application, and they are very similar to the conditions that were proposed for Anstey Park, so just to the south of development. HGVs will only be allowed to access the primary site access, and they will be directed to the strategic road network. So there are operational management plans to control the traffic during the weekday periods. There are conditions, and there is also a construction logistics plan that is conditioned to manage the traffic during construction, and this routes all of the HGVs along the strategic road network.
Can I just add another point of clarification? HGVs won't be the only vehicles entering the site. What about the other vehicles, the lighter vehicles or the employees' vehicles?
Yes, so staff and kind of normal vehicles, so cars, they can use the secondary site access, but it is a limited site access.
From the public gallery, please. We can't hear the officer's response.
So yes, they will be allowed to use the secondary site access. However, the transport assessment that has been undertaken, it's accounted for where the local labour pool will be drawn from. So for the warehouses, for example, there's a 30% modal shift proposed, which will therefore mean that an element of those workers will be coming through either public transport, the shuttle buses, or the demand response travel units. And these will all be mainly routed through the primary site access, and that diagram that was shown earlier in terms of the wider network, so there will be staff coming from Birmingham, Rugby, Coventry. That has all been assessed within the transport assessment.
Yeah, I've got a little question of my own. Regarding, I think it's Clifford Bridge, I understand that there were concerns raised by the parish councils about the condition of the bridge and its ability to cope with higher volumes of traffic. Do we know whether Warwickshire County Council, as the highway authority, is carrying out 2 yearly monitoring surveys of those bridges, or will it be part of the conditions we would expect with this application?
So in relation to the bridges, Warwickshire County Council have reviewed the whole of the application and they have no objection. In relation to the bridge in Anstey, that was included within the traffic model. So any impact over that bridge has been assessed through the modelling on the application. I'm not aware of what surveys Warwickshire are undertaking, but the relevant conditions are imposed on the application.
Just come back on that. I am aware through independent bridge assessments that Rugby Borough Council is carrying out on some of its older bridges, 4 of which are in my ward, by the way, that it is the responsibility of the highway authority to carry out biannual surveys of those bridges and carry out any remedial works should it be found to be required. And I think we asked the County Council if they've actually done those surveys, and will they be doing any remedial works on these particular bridges that have some age?
Thank you. I'd just like to clarify a bit further regarding the biodiversity net gain and the figures that you mentioned. So the 16% sounds quite a low figure to me. I was hoping it might be a bit higher. And is there a way, if this was passed, for it to be a condition that it would be over, say, 20%?
So in relation to the biodiversity net gain, this application was submitted where the 10% lawful requirement was not imposed. So they do not technically have to actually even provide 10% net gain. That's why it's considered to be a significant benefit that 16% for habitats, 12% for hedgerows and 16% for watercourses is the net gain in this instance. So that will be the minimum that is conditioned. That's not to say that the landscaping may be improved and there could be a higher net gain, but the minimum condition will be that those 3% are met on the site.
When you indicated.
So my microphone is flaring up. The report mentions the establishment of an employment and training hub in Rugby. Has a site been identified for that yet?
Not to date, no. So the provision of the cost for that hub and the running cost as well is identified within the heads of terms for the Section 106. And it will be within the construction period, which is a 5 to 6 year period, that site will be identified, purchased, refitted, and then ready for prior to occupation, so that that hub can deliver the necessary skills needed for the local people.
Councillor Harrington.
Thank you, Chair. If it does go through, I'm obviously concerned that this is a massive development and we need to make sure there is an officer on board on this, because you've got various parish councils to making sure that the Frasers Group are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that did come up from our site visit the other day. So I would like to confirm, is that been considered? I know it was last minute, but it's a thing that came to my head when I was looking at the site itself. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Harrington. In terms of, I think we're at 110 conditions that are recommended on the decision notice. Those conditions have different points in which they come into effect. But on such a large site as this, even during the construction period, well, there will be a significant amount of lorries moving soil around within the site and to and from the site. It is really important that the officers of this council monitor those conditions effectively. And it is my commitment to members tonight that there will be a resource provided at the relevant points to ensure that those conditions are monitored, and that we work with the developer to ensure that they comply with those conditions as set out in the report.
Question from Councillor Freeman, and then we will let oh, get a whole swarm of you now. Councillor Freeman had his hand up first, and I am mindful of the time and the opportunity to give those who have indicated they want to speak in this debate the opportunity to do so.
I'm told that my problems with the microphone is because I don't know what I'm doing with it. But my question is on the conditions. There's a lot of conditions that seem to apply after the construction phase has ended. How are we going to enforce them?
There is relevant triggers within all of the conditions, so information has to be provided by a certain time, and then it either has to be developed in accordance with those details and maintained in perpetuity, and it will be worded as such, or it has to be implemented by a certain time. So, for example, the information may have to be provided before development commences, and then it has to be put in place before occupation of the development.
Can I move on to the next person, please? We will have a general debate. Councillor Willis.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I must commend the officers for their report. Some clarification on the special circumstances with regard to how they are weighted. The slide that you very helpfully showed us, and the end of the report does say that there are very clear special circumstances for the recommendation. But I totted up, looking at the two sides, the harms and benefits, 4 substantial harms against 2 benefits, and then 2 significant harms against 5 significant benefits. Those numbers look quite close. So what is the, if you like, the weighting behind? We know the substantial, significant, the moderate and the limited, but is there then underneath that another weighting that would say push, I don't know, 5 benefits over 4 substantial harms? Just be helpful to understand, particularly to inform the debate later this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're correct in that the weighting goes substantial, significant, moderate, limited. It's a scale. And then within that, there is an element of a scale within each. So you could have a low limited impact or a high limited impact. It's not an exact science, but there is a scale as such. And in this instance, it's been determined that the entirety of the benefits, especially the economic benefits in relation to this proposal, outweigh the harms that have been identified, as was shown earlier on the slide.
Yeah, and just to add to that, when doing the planning balance, it is a planning judgment. So in the officers' report before you this evening, officers have provided their planning judgment based on their expertise to come to that assessment. It is for members to reach their own planning judgment based on the information before you in the committee report and the late items, and to assess whether the benefits outweigh the harm.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just have another question about the parking provision. So obviously it says in the report that our own policy, Rugby Borough Council's policy, suggests there should be 7,332 parking spaces on a site of this size, and they're looking to provide 2,903, which I think is about 40%. That's quite a shortfall. I'm not a transport expert. I'm not a highways expert. I'm just interested how that vast difference can be seen as acceptable, and why our number differs so much from what's seen as acceptable in this report.
Yes, so it is based on the unique nature of this development and the various uses proposed, and the overlap with it being an integrated campus. Our highways consultants, which are independent to any of the highway authorities, are with us tonight. So they're just going to speak a bit in detail about that car parking assessment.
Good evening, thank you. That requirement would be if you had each individual land use having to consume their own smoke in terms of parking. With this campus development, you have elements of the development where they're sharing. There's internalisation of trips. So some people accessing the employment space, for example, won't necessarily need additional parking for the convenience stores. So when you add that all up, essentially you get a reduction below that kind of standard land use to land use approach. The other reduction is essentially reliant on the travel plan measures. So the shuttle bus intervention in particular is reducing the warehouse staff car reliance, essentially. So there's a first principles approach there in terms of parking to do with land use and the travel plan interventions.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Can I just have a clarification on the timeline, if possible, please? When's the proposed first date of development and proposed first date of use?
There's not a proposed date as such, but if permission was granted this evening, then there would be a process that needs to be undertaken before the decision can be issued. So we would have to refer to the casework unit, and the Section 106 would be necessary. Therefore, the decision would be issued next year. Then discharge of conditions would be required in order to commence on site, but that would be envisaged to be next year. And then there is a 5 to 6 year construction period. So Fraser Group are currently aiming for a 2029/2030 occupation on the site.
Any further, can I ask people if they've got electronic devices to please switch them off? It does interfere with the presentation. That was the last point of clarification. Can I now hand over?
Okay, just before we go into the public speaking, I'm just going to do a refresher of the rules of public speaking so everybody is clear about what's going to happen next. The three speakers objecting to the proposal will have 3 minutes each to make their presentation. They'll be warned by a short alarm when they have 30 seconds left, and then a further alarm will sound when their time has expired. Their presentation should then be brought to a halt. No extra time will be allowed. In the interest of fairness, the applicant will then have a 9-minute slot to speak to match the objector's time slot. And then the ward councillor will have a 3-minute slot to speak. After each speaker has spoken, there will be an opportunity for members to ask any points of clarification to them. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters that have previously put before the committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material planning considerations only, and any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that has not previously been brought to the planning authority's attention, i.e. introduce late items that have not been suitably considered by officers and properly addressed in the officer's report to the committee for councillors' deliberation. No visual aids or handouts may be used, and no questions to officers or councillors will be allowed. Members of the public are not allowed to take part in the debate once their presentation has been given. So a reminder, it will be the objectors first, then the supporter, which is the applicant, and then the ward councillor. And given the time pressure on the speaking slot, and I know people are generally nervous when they are coming to speak in front of the planning committee, could I ask the public gallery to please be mindful and respectful of that and give them their opportunity to have their say, whether for or against.
Right. Can I ask Mrs. Gail Ash if she could be ready to have her 3 minutes to make a contribution? Thank you.
Thank you. You will no doubt have been expecting Stave Anstey Greenbelt to be an outraged group of NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And you'd be right, because our backyard happens to be Greenbelt land. And it's not just for the benefit of us lucky enough to live in the village, it's for everyone and for future generations. I want to draw your attention to 2 other sites detailed in the Alternative Site Assessment Main Report, September 2023, which have been explored and ruled out, both of which are not in Greenbelt land. The document cites essential operational criteria as minimum site area, minimum of over 50 hectares, and access to the strategic road network. The first is referenced as ASA 26, land to the south of Daventry Road, Willoughby, Rugby. It comprises approximately 105 hectares, isn't in Greenbelt land, and is within the so-called Golden Triangle, given access to the strategic road network as well. The second is ASA 28, land at Drayton Grange Farm, Fenny Drayton. This site extends to 133 hectares. It's not designated Greenbelt and again gives access to the strategic road network. So despite both of these sites meeting the minimum criteria set by Fraser Group themselves, they've ruled them out for flimsy arguments, and I'll quickly give you 3. Firstly, part of the site contains Grade 2 agricultural land. So does Anstey. Number 2, the site has poor access to public transport. So does Anstey. In fact, from S106 in the planning application, the sum of 4.7 million times 2 is going to be used towards the upgrading of bus services, non-car public services. So there's funding available to uplift transport to whichever site is chosen. And lastly, A large-scale development in this location, it would result in significant incursion into the open countryside. From Fraser Group's Green Belt assessment, Anstey is not a town, so Green Belt Purpose 2, preventing neighbouring towns merging into one another, was not considered relevant to this gap. One of the Green Belt's key purposes is to assist in safeguarding the countryside. Once Green Belt land is gone, it's gone. So I'd urge you to reject this application in favour of one of the other shortlisted sites not in Green Belt land. Thank you.
Could you have the officer's response to any points of clarification?
No, it's whether members have got any points of clarification.
Have the members got any points of clarification following the contribution from the objector?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify the two alternative sites put forward. The objector commented that they were not in the Greenbelt. Can we confirm, are they in open countryside?
Yes, I can confirm that they are not within Greenbelt, they're in open countryside, but they were discounted for other reasons.
Can I ask Councillor John Reid to make his presentation, please?
I'm from Brinklow, and this is what we think about the proposal. The report is written in a very glossy approach, which has not been thought through, and as at today, there are 12 consultee objections, and I propose to speak about two major ones. National Highways have an issue with the junction, and they've requested a referral until the improvement works have been carried out, as per their email of the 6th of November this year. In paragraph 2541 of the report, Coventry Council officers state they didn't agree with the traffic management assessment methodology, and no weight has been given to it. So they obviously have a different way of working things. 40 pages of the Chief Officer's report are given to traffic assessments in Coventry, but nothing at all with traffic assessments for the RBC ratepayers who live in the adjacent villages and who will be drastically affected by the increases in traffic volume. Paragraph 4618 states that at this time it has not been adequately demonstrated that any impacts upon Coventry's network or the M69 Junction 1 have been adequately mitigated, and therefore the proposal does not comply with policies D1, D2, the local plan or the wider policies of the NPPF. WCC say that if the M6 blocks, alternative routes to the southeast are via unusable minor roads with single tracks and low-height bridges. Coventry Council have assessed a number of routes. They've looked at 25 junctions and proposed changes to nearly all of them, including some major changes to junctions which at this time don't have sufficient capacity. Of particular interest was the junction on the A444, but I suppose if you've got a helicopter, that don't really matter, does it? Now, going on to flooding, very, very interesting, gentlemen, that tonight the picture of central northern fields is underwater. And we are talking about building on that site when, as my colleague Gail has already said, there are alternative sites, and the alternative sites indeed have rail connections, which Anstey does not.
Let the meeting move forward without rounds of applause. It's not normal practice in this chamber. Can I ask councillors if you have any points of clarification given Mr. Reid's comments? Councillor Daly. the technology.
Thank you. Sorry, was it Councillor Reid? I didn't quite catch it. Thank you. I've got a question for Councillor Reid. Is that okay? Thank you. Thank you. I was just wondering, I know there was talk at the start of this meeting that some local parish councils are requesting deferment of this application to give further time for consideration of the additional information that's come to light over the last couple of days. What's the view of Brinklow Parish Council?
Our view is that together with the other parishes that are affected by this monstrosity building, that if we can possibly raise the finance, we probably would call for an adjournment.
Just a couple of points of clarification in relation to National Highways objection and the statement that they object to the impacts on M69 Junction 1 and M6 Junction 2. The latest late item that was published today set out that National Highways removed their holding objection this morning, and they are now happy with all of the impacts upon the strategic road network, which includes M69 Junction 1 and M6 Junction 2. In relation to the assessments undertaken for the Warwickshire and the Coventry areas, yes, Coventry City Council do agree to the input into the travel modelling. However, Warwickshire, National Highways and our independent transport assessments do agree to all of those inputs. Therefore, it's considered that it is an adequate assessment has been undertaken for all areas of the highway network that has been considered through this application. In relation to the assessment on Warwickshire, an assessment has been undertaken. The presentation showed the RAM model extent, which showed the area that the modelling was run in Warwickshire, which was a significant area that was identified in dark grey. And this didn't have as much of a mention to the Coventry because Coventry specified 19 different junctions. However, the RAM model outputs showed that in terms of Warwickshire, there was not a significant impact that required mitigation within the area. The only condition that is imposed is traffic calming measures for Anstey and Chiltern, which will be determined through a condition at a later date.
Don't interrupt the officers. Are there any other points of clarification from members? No? All right. Lawrence, Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry, you talked about inputs to the model. I thought Coventry City Council's issues was actually to do with methodology, and that's what's recorded in the report?
Yes, so the methodology is the input. So the trip generation and the trip distribution are the two elements of the inputs to the model. So they have to determine what the generation of the trips from the development will be, also what that distribution will be, so where those traffic flows will go, and that is the methodology. So that's what goes into any model, and that is what Coventry City Council do not agree to. But as mentioned, the other two highway authorities plus our independent transport consultant have agreed those inputs.
Can we just note that it was taken as significant that Coventry City Council didn't agree, as I believe on the balance?
Yeah, just to come back, when the officer first responded to that question, she said that Coventry City Council had agreed the inputs, as had Warwickshire County Council and National Highways. She clearly misspoke because, as you pointed out in the committee report, Coventry City Council don't agree to the inputs, and Warwickshire County Council and National Highways do. Now, Warwickshire County Council and National Highways are the highway consultants, the highway authorities for this application, because one is Warwickshire County Council, which is in the highway authority which Rugby Borough sits, and National Highways, who are responsible for the strategic road network. Coventry City Council are a neighbouring highway authority, so we have involved them in the process. We have involved them through the pre-application process. We've involved them all the way through this process, and unfortunately, they would not agree the inputs. But the two responsible highway authorities did agree the inputs. And the council's also employed its independent consultants in relation to highways to assess those inputs as well. So when you've got three highway either authorities or consultants determining that those inputs are reasonable to be able to assess the proposal, and one party just will not agree, as the local planning authority, we have to make a decision in which to move forward in what is a reasonable approach to take. And that is the approach that's been set out in the report.
Can I ask Councillor Adrian Warwick to make his presentation, mindful of the 3-minute requirement?
Firstly, thank you for this opportunity to address this meeting this evening. As the previous chair of Anstey Parish Council, as well as their current county councillor, I thank you for letting them speak for them. I'm not just going to focus on the planning arguments. My colleagues will and have made these points very eloquently, but look at the context of what this application means. In my many years as a councillor and involved in planning, I don't think I've ever seen a report with so many statutory objectors and a neighbour major in authority questioning the methodology, and I suddenly wouldn't expect the words recommended for approval to be on it. I also wonder how a lack of a train and a helicopter flying about sits with your climate emergency. I'm surprised that this application has come forward so swiftly, given the number of other older applications in my area which still remain unresolved, and despite the plethora of issues and amendments that seem to be required. This application is far too unready to be here tonight. An application of this magnitude, granted or refused, needs careful consideration and preparation. So this report has all the planning arguments for refusal. There's even a line in it that says that because the NPPF says an application should be refused, that it must be refused. Even the borough's employment need for, and there isn't one, you concede that, cannot justify the destruction of the green belt. This application is in conflict in so many ways with the local plan, all clearly set out in this report. So what is the justification? Well, allegedly economic benefit. In short, money. The money these relocated, not new jobs, as has been said tonight, will bring to the Borough of Rugby, or after Monday's announcement, its impending successor. So I have to ask you, is this enough relocated money to justify what would be the destruction of green fields, habitats, woodlands, and the horrific impact in terms of views and traffics this will have on Anstey, which would fit twice into the largest unit, and the surrounding northern parishes? Is the 8 million to the referred to town centre hub and the alleged 9 million in business rates and other financial contributions sufficient to grant this application? The jobs for Coventry, the routing plan shows that. And perhaps, if approved, the boundary and benefits should be transferred to them. I would imagine a different recommendation would be on your report if that was the case. This report is very, very clear. The application conflicts with, in almost every way, all of your policies and has many glaring contradictions. What it does bring is money. I came into local politics to do the right thing. I'm sure all of you did as well. If you feel like I do, this report is not ready to be here, please seek to defer it till it is. Perhaps the Chair can get an answer to his WCC bridge question as well. And maybe you can overcome the raft of objections. Or if you believe like me that policies, the green belt, and these people in these villages matter more than money, I implore you to look at the raft of reasons and say no and reject it.
Can I have some quiet now, please? If you want to be here all night, we can be. Any points they wish of clarification, so they wish to raise, given the content of Councillor Warwick's response.
Yes, just 2 points of clarification in relation to statements in relation to the NPPF saying must. That is incorrect. The NPPF says should, and National Highways have removed their objection as stated previously.
Can I ask Rupert Visick, who's supporting the application, to make his presentation now? Thank you.
Thank you, members, for allowing me to speak on behalf of the applicant this evening. Fraser's Group began as a small sport and ski shop in 1982 and has grown to become a major UK high street retailer with over 1,000 stores and approximately 21,000 jobs in the UK alone. The group currently contains over 40 different retail brands. We play an important role in supporting the success of the retail sector and, in turn, towns and cities across the country. The business philosophy has been to manage operations from a central hub, with Shirebrook currently serving as our headquarters. However, Shirebrook was not originally designed with future growth in mind, resulting in capacity limitations as we've expanded. Also, as a result of acquisitions, there are office, warehousing and other company facilities spread across the UK, compromising the central hub business model. To drive efficiencies and maximise opportunities for further investment in the retail sector and UK town and city centres, we require a new purpose-built campus headquarters. The new campus in Rugby will bring together all our activities in one strategic location. It will include corporate and supplier offices, nationwide logistics facilities, retail and leisure R&D space, training and development facilities, accommodation and sports and recreation facilities. We have undertaken a thorough and extensive site search exercise as set out in the submitted alternative site assessment, which recognises the Greenbelt location, but demonstrates the site being the optimal location for the development. As heard tonight and detailed in the committee report, the development offers significant national, regional and local benefits. The increased capacity at the campus, which will be at the forefront of logistics innovation, could support an additional 750 stores across the UK, potentially generating around 11,000 new jobs. This expanded capacity is expected to contribute an additional £69 million to GDP annually. We are proud to be driving innovation in the retail sector, and the campus will help increase R&D activity outside the southeast of England, which aligns with key government policy objectives. The logistics sector plays a vital role in the regional and local economy. This development ensures Rugby can build upon and optimise this critical economic aspect. The campus will create many new high-quality jobs, increasing employment in Rugby by 15% and boosting the local economy by 10%, equating to approximately £340 million per year. It will also generate between £210 and £240 million in wages, with indirect benefits flowing through local spending and supply chain activities. Moreover, the development will help reduce deprivation in key areas by providing on-site jobs and work readiness initiatives. We're working with the council to help create an employment and training hub in the town centre, which will have wider benefits for employment and training throughout the borough. The Learning and Development Academy will ensure staff receive top-tier education in excellent facilities. The Academy will work with local training providers, including colleges and universities, to advertise vacancies and graduate programmes. The local community will also have access to the campus's auditorium, training rooms and sports facilities, including a gym, swimming pool, sports hall and pitches. We have carefully considered the site's context and worked collaboratively with your officers, the community and key stakeholders throughout the pre-application design process. We are incredibly proud of the campus design, which integrates state-of-the-art buildings within new parkland, each with a unique yet cohesive character. The campus provides circa 60 hectares, 53% of the total campus area, of publicly accessible parkland, Improvements to the public rights of way network and the canal towpath will significantly enhance public access to these spaces. The campus will exceed a 10% biodiversity net gain, significantly improve the local wildlife site, and includes initiatives to support an endangered species. We have worked extensively with your officers and those from National Highways, Warwickshire County Council, Coventry City Council, and other stakeholders to ensure that the transport demands of the campus are met through a package of measures to be funded by the applicant, including improvements to existing junctions, Junction 2 and Junction 3 of the M6, Junction 1 of the M69, and on a number of local junctions in Coventry. There would be extensive enhancements to allow walking and cycling to the site from the surrounding areas. New and improved public bus services and shuttle bus services would connect the site to Rugby, Coventry, and other locations around the site. Measures to ensure that traffic associated with the site does not use local roads will be put in place. The development also meets exceptional sustainability standards, including BREEAM Outstanding accreditation for all buildings and a commitment to achieve net zero carbon. The proposed development offers significant economic, social and environmental benefits, which provide the very special circumstances that clearly outweigh the harms to the Greenbelt and other harms as set out in the officer's report. The campus has been designed through a collaborative process seeking to reduce and mitigate impacts and maximise positive outcomes. This will be a high-quality space where innovation and enterprise can thrive. I respectfully ask that you follow your officer's recommendations and approve the planning application. And we look forward to calling Rugby the new home for Fraser's Worldwide Headquarters Campus. Thank you.
Do members have any points of clarification to the Speaker?
Thank you. Was it Rupert? Sorry. Thank you. In your view, why do you think Coventry City Council are not supportive of this application on high? Okay. Sorry, just to clarify, in your presentation, you mentioned that you'd work with National Highways, Warwickshire County Council, and Coventry City Council. Why are there still concerns about the junction? Do you believe? Why have those concerns in Coventry not been allayed yet by Uni Team?
I can only reiterate what the officer said earlier in relation to our discussions and negotiations with the highways authorities.
I've got one myself in terms of an employment site. Whilst we're looking at it in terms of Rugby Borough, is it not true that such headquarters, such locations are in fact sub-regional employment sites? The workforce will be drawn from Rugby, Nuneaton, Coventry, wherever it's needed to be drawn from. It won't just all come from Rugby, will it?
Correct. I think, as I said, this is a campus which has local, regional and national implications, and therefore, by definition, employment will come from all of those sets.
Just a second point on that. In terms of the habitat and the creation of a wildlife haven, what happens after the 6 years? Will you be looking to gift it to the parish council or Warwickshire Wildlife Trust? Who's going to look after it after the 6 years?
Yes, I can clarify that. So in relation to the 48 hectares of publicly accessible open space, it will be for Fraser Group to manage and maintain. But there is a clause within the Section 106 that will maintain it as publicly open space in perpetuity. So it will always have access from the public, but it is for Fraser Group to maintain.
Clarify, would that be up to the local authority then to appoint a managing agent for that site?
There's provisions within the Section 106 about a management company and various steps that they have to undertake, which are the standard provisions that we have for any open space within Section 106's. So, yes.
Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. This is a follow-up question from your earlier point about employment. Fraser Group's currently located in Shirebrook in Derbyshire. What's the catchment area for your various categories of employees?
Could you clarify the question a bit, please?
Well, in the report it states there'd be several thousand job opportunities in the surrounding area to your proposed location. How many of those employees would be drawn exclusively from this area? How many would you expect to be relocated from Shirebrook?
At this stage, we've done a lot of modelling, and it will. There's an awful lot of input factors into this which will determine the answer to that. I don't think anyone can give you a clear answer on that at the moment.
Sorry, well, perhaps I can frame it another way. If for example, you were to relocate somewhere like Wales, would you expect most of your employees to be drawn from the immediate locale, or would you be bringing them in from further afield?
I think there is always an expectation that depending on the lesser skilled nature of employment, your catchment area will be proportionate to that. I'm sorry, I'm struggling to know where the question you're trying to ask me.
Are there any further points of clarification? No, thank you.
How many jobs are going to be lost in Derby?
Can I ask the officer to...
So just to clarify your point, Councillor Freeman, there will be inevitably some of the jobs that will come from the Shirebrook site in the first couple of years. There is obviously a overturn of jobs throughout the course of any industry. So in, say, 5 years' time after occupation, those jobs may be filled by a local person. In relation to the majority of the jobs, though, they will be for local people. So there's not an exact percentage because obviously the construction period is 4 to 5 years. So that has not been calculated to date, but there will be a significant amount of jobs available to local people, and that will be secured through the Section 106 as well, and the priority given to local people within Rugby.
Okay then, and the final word to the ward councillor, Councillor Heather Timms, again, mindful of the 3-minute criteria.
This major application is in Greenbelt, which is afforded the highest level of protection in the MPPF and under our local plan. Anstey is a tiny village. It will be dwarfed by this large development. In fact, it will fit in one of the large warehouses. The planning balance indicates that substantial weight should be attached to the adverse impacts on landscape and the visual impacts. This will stand out like a sore thumb. This is a very large warehouse retail site given another name. With the advancement of AI and other warehouse technologies, it is likely to be very quickly populated with robots, which do not need parking spots. The jobs are a relocation and not new jobs. This is not an allocated site in the local plan, and other sites are available in sustainable locations, including a train station due to come forward, so it's not reliant on bikes. Paragraph 11.12 of your addendum states that the application does fail the sequential test of paragraph 95 of the MPFPF relating to main town centre uses, and therefore it should be refused. It also fails the sequential test on the flood risk paragraph, and therefore should be refused. These are significant matters to take into account in favour of not allowing development on the green belt. The very special circumstances in this case seem to be that if you build it big enough in the green belt, then it can be justified. Employment need is already being met here in Rugby, and there is a conflict with the local plan policy ED3. Rugby is identified as the main focus for all development in the borough in policy GP2. So again, this development is in conflict. This is a major site, and therefore this conflicts should carry substantial weight in planning terms. In Rugby, we have a local plan, and we have an emerging local plan. We plan in Rugby, not on the hoof to the highest bidder, who adds the bells and whistles to make it look as though it can be justified. I do not believe the benefits outlined in the report cannot be met on a site locally which is not in the green belt, and therefore the very special circumstances do not outweigh the harm and conflicts which are identified in your report as substantial. I urge you to refuse this application.
Just for the benefit of the public gallery, as Councillor Timms is a ward councillor, under our rules of procedure for speaking at planning committees, if she's spoken either in support or against an application, she has to leave the chamber and take no further part in the meeting, so she cannot influence any of the members of planning committees. That's set out in our constitution. So that's why Councillor Timms has left the building.
Thank you. Councillor Moran, on the points raised. Points of clarification.
We're in debate now because she's gone. We're into debate because
All right. I'm now very be informed that we are in debate, and our first speaker in the debate will be Councillor Moran.
Thank you, Chair. I did actually have a point of clarification. It was related to the comments on failing sequential test in relation to flooding and retail, and clarifying that mitigation does address that, but I'm sure that can be discussed in due course. I wanted really just to start, that obviously, again, repeating what I said at the start. Thank you to officers is clearly a very, very substantial scheme. Huge amounts of officers' time have been put into this, huge resources, and I think it's just conscious to recognise that officers and consultants are independent and professional. And so, I guess to kick things off for me, on balance, I do wish to give my full support to the scheme in front of us, and I wish to propose to vote for approval. It is accompanied, all of this documentation, by a full suite of technical reports. We've had 5 full working days to get into them, a full environmental impact assessment, and we, I think, need to take that balance into consideration. It ultimately is clear to me that the development does have significant benefits, not just locally, but for regional and national priorities. The applicant has considered other potential sites, and our officers do agree that is the best potential site for them. I do appreciate we get into nuances about what is technically in a green belt and what is technically open countryside. But I do agree with, I've quoted it, chapter point 1324, this is a sustainable location. It will deliver significant new employment opportunities, over 5,000 jobs, strengthening important sectors of our local economy, bringing a new range of diverse and high-quality jobs to the area. The scheme, as has been said, will make a substantial contribution to the UK economy, but also to our local economy, growing it by some 10%. I don't think that's insignificant. Our borough's residents will not only benefit from new employment, but also to the training and upskilling, and particularly in that new facility in Rugby. The design of the campus has evolved positively through extensive engagement with our officers through the process. Also, to bring attention to the fact that the site currently, relative to the future, the site going forward will open up 48 hectares of publicly accessible open space, with improvements to public rights-of-way and biodiversity, including improving that existing local wildlife site, creating new habitats. Ultimately, I think a lot of this, and as indicated by the relative percentage of the pages to it, there are huge, fundamentally transport perspectives to this scheme. I think ultimately, where we have national highways, we have Warwickshire County highways in a positive position, and noting today national highways withdrawing that holding objection. Whilst I do absolutely support the principle of retaining valued greenbelt, we do know that some greenbelt land and open countryside will be lost to deliver new employment in order to support our local economy. That's the very clear position of long-standing national planning policy under both the previous Conservative government and the present Labour one. Ultimately, I'm going to sum up, more than any other councillor over the last 2 years in this chamber, I've bemoaned the history of this council to approve schemes offering only warehousing facilities. I don't think we can be oblivious to the fact that this is more than just warehousing, but also conscious that Rugby does sit within that golden triangle. And so on that basis, I think there's a clear enhancement that we need to recognise. I'm also pleased to see that after my very loud cries of this council never previously looking at community infrastructure levy, this is indeed subject to a SIL, and that will be a benefit going forward. So for these reasons, I do agree that with officers, that very special circumstances exist, and that does mean that the harms set out are outweighed by the various benefits. I therefore see this development as a positive step forward for the borough's economy, and it should be noted that the emerging economic strategy that is a cross-party support does look at diversifying that local economy. It is also part of that regional and national planning picture that I think sets a framework for how this council must judge these applications against those policies. So for that reason, I wish to put on record to propose to support.
Please don't. This is getting to a very important stage, and I would like to see that. Councillor Ali, can you respond? I just wanted to get a second to the application.
I just wanted to come back on the points of clarification that you mentioned at the start. So in relation to retail, the sequential test has been passed. So that's set out within 14.8 of the report. The conclusion in relation to the significant adverse impact is on Coventry City Council. That is what is weighed in the planning balance, not the failure to satisfy the sequential test. In relation to flooding, the sequential test has not been passed, and that relates to there are 26 other sites that are technically sequentially preferable in terms of flood risk. However, Warwickshire County Council, Flood Risk Management and the Environment Agency have both reviewed the application, and in terms of flood risk on the site, but also in the neighbouring vicinity, they have deemed that the application is acceptable subject to conditions. And just one final point of clarification for members is that the community infrastructure levy is not a benefit to be weighed within the planning balance.
Yes, Councillor Freeman, are you seconding the approval? Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Thank you.
I'd like to put on record my thanks to the planning officers for this report. I've rarely read anything so detailed and so thorough, and it's clearly addressed a lot of potential and actual objections and queries that naturally arise over such a large application. There's been a fantastic amount of work done, and as a former council officer in another borough, I can readily recognise how much effort's been put into this. This is very high-level stuff. The report recommends the approval of the application, but it comes with loss of some greenbelt. And we had a clarification earlier. We're not losing all the greenbelt. We're losing a very, very small amount. It's 0.5%. So, nevertheless, we shouldn't take this lightly. And if we are to lose greenbelt, we'll have to do it for a very, very good reason. Now, I moved to Rugby about 15 years ago, and I've watched the council from a distance. I only became a member this year. But what disturbed me was the lack of ambition around economic strategy. We have a lot of insecure, low-paid jobs in this borough. Warehouse work at best pays about £16 an hour to an operative. It's not good. It's not good enough to buy a house in Rugby, which will cost you around £250,000 to £300,000. So we have a transient population of people who work within the town. Now, this application, there is a paragraph in there that puts it absolutely succinctly. It says the huge economic benefit to the proposal to Rugby is such that this gives rise to the very special circumstances case. This sort of stuff doesn't come along every couple of years. It comes along once in a generation. So it needs to be very carefully considered. We have an increasing population. Eventually, although we say we've got high employment rate, there will be more population coming along that will require good quality standard jobs. And if we don't do that, what we'll end up with is in a position like towns up in the northeast. Now, I come from a place called Middlesbrough, and it had substantial opportunities in the 19th century, and it thrived until around 1980. Something happened in 1979, but subsequently a lot of the industry was lost in that town, and it became a wasteland. It depopulated by about 80,000. Now, having made my home here, and made it the home of my children, I don't want to see that happen, and that's the risk we run unless we grasp these opportunities with open hands. The Fraser Group is not a corner shop. I had a quick look at their accounts. They're turning over £2.2 billion a year. They have significant resources. Now, to sustain a business like that, you have to be very serious about it. You have to be efficient and you have to be innovative. Now, a campus-style business is a recent development. There are other examples, some in this country, but not as large. James Dyson famously has one down in Malmesbury, which it is a fine example. It's one of the first. Others are in Europe. Adidas has one in Germany. Google has one in the United States. These are not just warehouses. These are serious businesses with the HQ located there. So the key decision makers will be located there. The key professionals will be located there. The management structure will be located there. This is not going to be just a warehouse. And the other thing that I find interesting is that a lot of training and research and development will also be located there. That's something that will benefit younger people in this borough. So, looking through the benefits, we have a huge site that's going to be constructed. I've heard the amounts of £600 to £700 million will be spent on the construction and all the associated works. You get 10 years of a training hub located in this town, something we've desperately needed. You get genuine high-quality employment opportunities for residents in a variety of professions and trades. That can't be anything but a good thing. We get a 10% boost to the local economy. That benefits everybody that lives here. And just to add to it, we benefit the rest of the UK. Fraser's plan to create 11,000 jobs. That's not insignificant. And it's something that we should be part of it. So I think if we're going to talk about special circumstances, I've heard the objections from the likes of Councillor Warwick and so on. This is special. And if we are going to turn it down, just how special does the application have to be? I think it meets this, and that's why I'm supporting it.
I have known council meetings go on till midnight. Would you like that? Just let the people let the councillors put their proposals now before this committee, and then we will have a democratic vote at the planning committee. Daly, would you like to put your proposal?
Yeah, thank you. I think this slide, which perfectly summed up this application, was the final one with the scales, and us having to weigh up that planning balance between the benefits and the harms. And pages 170 to 173 perfectly sum it up. I was particularly concerned by the highways objections, or lack of, the objections from National Highways particularly. I am really frustrated that this has come through, and that, it's underlined here in bold, removes their holding objection, and that this was only provided to us at lunchtime today. I just think this is such a big application. I'm honestly flabbergasted that we're looking at this today with only having that information so soon. I appreciate that the council is not required to give us any longer. So for me, this is about weighing up the advantages and disadvantages of this application. The economic benefits, I'm not completely sold on the economic benefits. I'm concerned, and I know it's not a material planning concern, I'm concerned about that we are just moving jobs from one part of the UK to another, and I understand that's not something we can use to judge this on today. I know there are massive economic benefits to the local area, but this is not. I mean, the residents of Anstey are here today. They are members of the Borough of Rugby, but this is not going to benefit Rugby only. This is not going to be jobs for just people from Rugby. We've heard that numerous times today. This is going to be the bus route, the proposed illustrative shuttle bus map. There's a bus route coming from Stetchford in Birmingham. There's multiple routes coming from Coventry. So with that in mind, I'm minded to say that, having considered the application carefully, I would like to move refusal on the following grounds. The application is wholly within the green belt, and therefore contrary to local plan policies GP1 and GP2 and paragraph 153 of the National Planning Policy Framework. Allowing this application to progress would result in irreparable harm to the Coventry green belt and the openness of the countryside, contrary to paragraph 142 of the NPPF, and undermines purposes A and C of the green belt as set out in paragraph 143 of the NPPF. In my view, the benefits of the scheme, whilst they are extensive, cannot outweigh the immeasurable harm to the green belt, which the officer's report clearly sets out, and so this application should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor Daly, for the clarity of your reason for refusal. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Lawrence, do you wish to speak at this point? Thank you.
Before I come to the point of seconding, I'd like to go through a little bit of debate to explain my reasoning. First of all, let's look at the traffic problem, which is, I'd say, about a third of the meat of the actual content of what we had. It isn't once that Coventry City Council complains, it's probably about 12 times, and I could go through the number of times it goes through. It's again and again and again. Now, I do absolutely respect National Highways and Warwickshire County Council on this, but there are governance procedures that can be used. So I will quote them. So it's GG 104, the assessment of safety risk, which on the categories that I understand this would fall underneath, just by the number of public that are interested in this and the fact that safety risks have been raised. Now, I am going to get to my point, Nicola, so I apologise for this, because this isn't statutory. Okay, it is something that is a recommendation. However, there is a process that could be raised about having a safety control review panel that this could go to decide. So we are out of time on this. I accept that. However, I would like that still to occur. So if this was to be approved, and I'm not here to recommend that, I would like there to be some form of informative, at least, to encourage that to happen. Safety is a critical issue. Maybe if I would like to carry on, Nicola, but maybe I'll return on that.
I'm just going to come back on one point on this, and then I'll pass over to our highway consultants. As members will know, this application has been in for over a year, and like I said previously, we undertook pre-application consultation before that, including all of the highway authorities, because let's be honest, we always knew that highways was going to be a big issue on this application. And what we sought to do as officers of this council was to get ahead of that and to involve all the parties at the very beginning and all sit around the table and look at this application collaboratively. You can only do that when all parties want to do that. And as the local planning authority, we have an obligation to determine planning applications. And we cannot effectively be prevented from making a decision because a party decides that they don't want to work collaboratively. And for months, this application has been delayed to try and seek that consensus. And we have not been able to achieve that consensus. And therefore, we as a local planning authority have got to move the application forward. So we have made an assessment on the impact on the Coventry network. That is what the applicant's consultants has modelled and what our consultants have reviewed. They've reviewed the mitigation measures that are required, and those are the conditions that you find in your report. So just in relation to the Coventry City Council point, I just want to emphasise how hard officers have worked to try and actually get all parties to agree. But when you can't do that, you do have to look at how you move the application forward, and that's what we've done. And I just wanted to assure members of the committee of that. In relation to safety, I will now pass on to our highways consultants.
Thank you. I mean, yeah, any off-site highway works will be subject to further detailed design, so any individual junction, be it the site access or any off-site mitigation, will need an individual road safety audit process to follow. So that's an independent consultant reviewing the safety implications of the junction, and then the relevant highway authority, be that National Highways, Warwickshire or Coventry, reviewing that safety process and signing off accordingly. So yeah, every single bit of off-site highway works will be subject to a road safety audit process.
Okay, so I'm satisfied with the responses there, but I just wanted to clarify that. I still raise that issue, that I think there should be some sort of safety review panel to clear this up.
Yeah.
Just also to clarify, within the section 106, there is a transport management group which will be set up, and that will be one of the issues that it will look at.
Okay, I'm satisfied with that response. If I can carry on my points of debate. Okay, so you've gone through various sequential tests on this. We've already discussed that it's failed on urban, it's failed on on flooding. Okay, mitigations are there, but there are already two sequential tests. Okay, the fundamental sequential test in my head is actually to do with the sites that have been looked at. And as I raised in the points of clarification, understanding the performance criteria of which those sites were looked at. So I haven't come out of here satisfied that I clearly understand how those sites have been assessed. Nearest to the strategic road network, okay? There are many of those sites, more than, there's 4 at least, which are not greenbelt. They might be open countryside, but they're not greenbelt, which are close to the strategic road network and been dismissed. One of those has been dismissed because it isn't to any, it's labour accessibility issues. Okay? That site happens to be next door to Magna Park when 10,000 people work. And it's been rejected for those reasons. That's ASA 94. So I don't find that the sequential test has been thorough enough looking at other sites. And to Fraser Group, I absolutely celebrate you want to come here, okay? It'll be a fantastic thing for Rugby Borough to have Fraser Group here. So it's not denying the benefits or anything, it's to do with the site that is being looked at and being chosen, which is the subject to planning here. Okay, so therefore I get to the point of reason rejection is I don't feel as if it's met that sequential test and therefore determined the very special circumstances. So I absolutely support the wording that has been proposed as it's been proposed, and I second the wording.
Other members wish to participate in the debate before we go to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. I earlier, wrongly, I acknowledge, attempted to make an observation. I will now make that observation. I look around me at the members of the committee, and unless I'm very much mistaken, I am the only councillor who represents the rural wards. And just to inform the room, I am a borough councillor for Woolston and the Lawfords. I am the chairman of Woolston Parish Council, but more importantly, I am a resident living in the within the rural community. I'm not convinced that the rural community, those 8 parish councils who have made those objections this evening, are being wholly represented. And I think that's something that should be looked at, bearing in mind that I'm here as a substitute for a substitute, which actually could have seen that would be no rural councillors. As a rural councillor, and looking at the final paragraphs in terms of the planning judgment and the special circumstances, I pointed out earlier this evening that the harms weighed in at 4 substantial against 2 for the benefits. And I've listened to the eloquent speeches made by colleagues behind me, making a very strong case for supporting the recommendation. But to me, the very special circumstances will always be people first before we look at the other issues. We can look at the green belt, we can look at the infrastructure. The traffic, as I mentioned when we visited, was my concern. It still remains my concern, and I think there are arguments there that are still to be answered. And with that in mind, I will be supporting my colleagues to the right. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Willis. I'm glad you reminded me of the site visit, where you were the only rural councillor who turned up. But mindful, we did do quite an extensive site visit, including look at the impact from Anstey Hall, where I think members noticed that the business park was more overbearing than this proposed development, which was within a dip, and will be as extensive tree planting around it. What stood out when we were at Anstey Hall was the horizontal lines of their development on the horizon. And I'm hoping when we do the tree planting that we will look at quality species like beech, oak, other trees that flowering chestnut, to look to draw the eye into the. Please, but we can remove you if we want. Can I have the officers to remove that gentleman, please? Right, just to go back to the point I was making, that if there is to look to be substantive, mature tree planting in the area, that tree planting should encourage the eye to the trees, not to the Anstey Business Park, which from that view, from Anstey Hall, is a bit of a blot on the landscape. Councillor Moran, did you want to come to this point?
Yes, no, thank you, Joe. No, I do. And I'd start, obviously, Councillor Willis knows how highly I think of his speeches. But I want to almost take issue in relation to not focusing on people. Because, and I'll start by, in terms of the point at which coming to determination of a feeling, of a view on this, had National Highways, had Warwickshire Highways not got to a point of removing their objections, then that impact on local residents would be unacceptable. And I think it's far too simplistic to think that this is all about money. As Councillor Warwick indicated, God knows what's going to happen with local government over the coming years. So it's not about some money here now. I think I go back to, for me, since I've been a councillor, we've been focusing on developing an ambitious but a more evolved economic strategy than we haven't had in the past. On a site such as this, adjacent to junction to the motorway junction, this is much more than a warehouse, and I think it contributes positively in that respect.
Sorry, we're drifting into political debate. Could we please keep to the planning issue matter, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to all of the speakers tonight. There's been lots of very good points, a lot of noise. On the site, I think it's a fantastic site. Biodiversity gain, all the net zero targets that they're working at, the renewables that are going into that, and through a process, whether that's flawed or not, it was deemed the best location. But that brings me to my first point, which is the location. It's in Greenbelt, and for me, that's a huge thing that I can't ignore. It's contrary to Purpose A, which is to do with unrestricted sprawl. It's contrary to Purpose C, encroachment into countryside. I also have a slight concern that it's a reduction in arable farmland as well. And my second point would be on the local plan. We can argue that it's out of date, we can argue that one's coming up, but it's still a material consideration. And as far as the local plan is concerned, there is no need for this development, despite the economic and the employment benefits. I totally understand, and it was a real point of conflict for me. But I do believe that on the basis of the local plan and the green belt, someone mentioned earlier that the very special circumstances are a judgment call. My judgment call is that the very special circumstances are not enough to outweigh the harm to the green belt and contrary to the local plan, so I will be also moving refusal of this. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers before we move to the votes? No? Okay, we now move to the votes.
So we're voting on the recommendation for approval.
Yeah. And the first vote will be on the recommendation for approval as printed on the report. Those in favour, please show. And those against? That vote is carried, and it is for approval. Thank you, members. The vote was 7-5. Yeah. That concludes the business of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.